Joining us right now is Democratic Congressman Eugene Vindman of Virginia. He sits on the House Armed Services Committee. Congressman, thanks for coming in. Let's jump into a couple aspects of this. Do you think U.S. military intervention in Iran is a good idea? Do you think it will help the protesters?
Well, first of all, thanks, Kate, for having me this morning. Look, let me start by saying this president is very much enamored by military action. Just think about the last year or so, less than a year that he's been in office. We've had strikes against Yemen, we've had strikes against Nigeria, Iran, now Venezuela. He recognizes that the U.S. military is an elite force. It is a precise instrument and has had a remarkable track record of success. And he thinks that somehow that the normal fog of war scenarios don't apply. I think we've been remarkably effective, but in not sustaining serious casualties, certainly in Venezuela. But war is war. It's an inherently dangerous enterprise. And so, as it relates to Iran in particular, I don't think overt military action is the right way to go.
I want to play for you what the White House is saying about the possible options that the president is considering in terms of military action.
I think one thing President Trump is very good at is always keeping all of his options on the table, and airstrikes would be one of the many, many options that are on the table for the commander-in-chief.
But as we've also been reporting, the Wall Street Journal is saying that the vice president and others around President Trump are pushing him to choose diplomacy first and military action as a last resort, if you will. What does diplomacy look like between, you think, President Trump and Iranian leaders?
Well, first of all, I think we all recognize that the Iranian regime is a authoritarian regime that is suppressing its people. And, I recognize that in my own family experience. We fled from a communist authoritarian regime. And we need to support the Iranian people in their struggle for freedom and independence. They're protesting largely peacefully on the streets, and they're being attacked and murdered. And I think, there's an irony, obviously, in what we see with ICE on America's streets. But just to stay focused on Iran, I think it means putting enormous pressure on the regime so they recognize that suppressing their own population through violence is not going to work. They're on the verge, potentially, of collapse. And at this stage, all the security forces are probably wondering, like, if I execute the regime's orders to suppress the population violently, will I be held accountable? And so that's exactly what we want the security forces to be thinking. And we and all of our allies and partners ought to be putting enormous pressure on the regime to restrain them.
So in some ways, do you support kind of the rhetoric, what you've been hearing coming from President Trump on this?
I support the Iranian people, which means that they are in a fight for freedom and, probably the likes of which we haven't seen since the 1979 revolution. Although there were protests like this every few years, just in 2022, there was a series of protests that were suppressed very violently. And so I support the Iranian people in their struggle for freedom, and that means we put enormous pressure. But I do not think that overt military action is the right way to go, certainly not without going to Congress and making a case to the American people. I mean, I think what the president did in Venezuela, also removing a authoritarian leader in Maduro, but leaving the regime in place. I mean, what has that really done for the people of Venezuela? I'm not sure.
We're now learning also in terms of not overt, I guess maybe obviously very short of overt military action, is that the president says that he's imposing a new tariff, that any country that does business with Iran will face a tariff of 25% on any trade that it does with the United States. Like many of these announcements that come on social media, short on detail, but we do know that China does a lot of business with Iran. Do you think this tariff will have an impact of, as you're saying, you're supporting the protesters and the protesters' rights? Do you think this move works towards those ends?
I think the president, obviously, in my mind, certainly has a credibility gap. He says a lot, and he follows through on very little, in my opinion. And it's unclear exactly what the parameters of these tariffs are. I think maybe it injects some uncertainty. But, certainly at a time when the American people also are paying high prices, affordability is an issue, the president's threats of additional tariffs and are doing nothing to assist the American people.
Congressman Eugene Vindman, thanks so much for coming in. Really appreciate your time. John.